I'm Paula. Standing in the conference room, I watched as my father, Mr. Thompson, crumpled to the floor, his face ashen and his knees buckling under the weight of the truth. It was a moment I'd both anticipated and dreaded for as long as I could remember. The DNA report lay open on the table in front of me, a stark testament to the betrayal and the secrets that had haunted our family for years. My father had always been a prominent figure in our small town. A well-known businessman, he commanded respect wherever he went. But at home, he was a different man. He would look at me with suspicion, muttering under his breath that I was too refined to be his. These words were like a dagger to my heart, repeated over the 29 years of my life. My mother, Mrs. Thompson, was a gentle soul. She spent her days running our family home, a place filled with warmth and love, or so I thought. When my father would question her about me, she would simply lower her head, a silent protest against his baseless accusations. One day at a community gathering, as he stood up and pointed at me across the room, uttering those cruel words again, I could see the pain in my mother's eyes. Something in me snapped. I took her hand and whispered, "We're leaving, Mom." I worked as a pediatric nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, the same hospital where I was born. I put myself through nursing school by working long hours at a local diner. I was good at my job, some might say I was born for it. But every time a mother would tell me that, I'd feel a pang of sadness because my own father had never given me such affirmation. There was also a little fact I'd buried deep in my memory. When I was 20, I noticed something strange on my hospital footprint card. It indicated my blood type was AB, while both my parents were O. At that time, I rationalized it as a clerical error and put it out of my mind. But after that community gathering incident, I couldn't let it go anymore. I decided to order a DNA test. It was supposed to end the endless suspicion, to prove once and for all that my mother was innocent. Getting my parents to take the swabs was a battle. My mother was terrified, knowing my father would twist the results. "He'll find a way to doubt it," she said, her hands trembling. My father, on the other hand, was almost gleeful, as if he was sure the test would confirm his long-held suspicion. As I waited for the results, I couldn't help but reflect on my life. I thought about how my grandmother, Mrs. Harris, played a part in this whole mess. She was a traditionalist, believing that family was all about blood. There was a large portrait gallery in her house, filled with pictures of our family members, but there was no place for me. When I asked her why at the age of 10, she simply replied, "You're not one of us," in a cold, matter-of-fact tone. She made sure I knew I had no claim to the family inheritance. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. I gathered my parents in the kitchen, the very place where so many hurtful words had been spoken. I read the first line out loud: "Probability of paternity, Mr. Thompson, 0%. My father's face lit up with a sick sense of victory. He pointed at my mother, shouting, "I knew it. I knew it for 29 years. But then I read the second line: "Probability of maternity, Mrs. Thompson, 0%. The room went deathly silent. My mother gasped in disbelief, and my father's face turned pale. I had to explain it to them. "I'm not your biological child. Neither of you." It was as if the world had stopped spinning. That night, I went through my mother's keepsake box again. There, I found the footprint card and a faded Polaroid photo. The photo showed a young mother holding a baby, and on the back, written in my mother's handwriting, was a note. But the number on the baby's bracelet didn't match the number next to the baby in the photo. It was clear as day that there had been a mix-up at the hospital. I made a plan. I uploaded my DNA to a relative matching database. One night, after a long shift at the hospital, sitting in my scrubs with a cold cup of coffee, I saw a name at the top of the list, a predicted first cousin. The name was Mr. Hall, from a town 100 miles away. Without hesitation, I reached out to him. The next day, I drove to his town. A woman, Mrs. Hall opened the door. When I saw her face, it was like looking into a mirror of my own future. She invited me in, and as we sat at the kitchen table, sharing our stories, I learned that she had a daughter named Lily. She described Lily as having fair hair and a square jaw, just like my father and my younger brother, Ethan. Mrs. Hall then told me about the night Lily was born. There had been a power outage at the hospital due to a storm. A young nurse had been constantly apologizing, but she never knew why. I froze when I heard this, realizing that this was the missing piece of the puzzle. I brought my mother to meet Lily. When Lily stepped out onto the porch, my mother clutched her chest as if she'd been struck. Lily looked exactly like my father and my brother, with the same features that I'd always lacked. My mother finally broke down in tears after all these years of holding back, saying, "Oh, there you are." I knew I needed the hospital's records to confirm everything. But when I went to the hospital's risk management department, I was met with resistance from Ms. Collins. She claimed that the records from that year had been lost during a system migration. But I knew better. I could tell she was hiding something. I decided to fight the hospital legally. I hired a lawyer, a wise and calm woman. She explained the discovery rule to me. Since this was an error that no one could have known about before, the legal time limit started from the day I discovered it. She drafted a formal request for the records and informed the hospital that I would be holding a meeting with all parties involved. I also tracked down the retired nurse, Mrs. White. She was now in her 75s, living in a cozy little house. When I told her who I was and why I was there, she sat down slowly and began to tell her story. She was the senior nurse on the night of the storm. There were 2 baby girls born close to each other. A young charge nurse, who later turned out to be Ms. Collins, was in charge. When the power went out for about 90 seconds and a hemorrhage alarm went off, she rushed out of the nursery. When she came back, the young nurse had already re-banded the babies in the dark. Mrs. White filed a concern report the next day, but it was quickly closed, and she was transferred to another unit. Before the meeting, I went to see my father in the garage where he'd been hiding. He tried to make excuses, saying that the lab might have made a mistake. But when I laid out all the evidence in front of him, including the DNA report, the footprint card, and the name of the witness, Mrs. White, he was speechless. For the first time, he asked the question that should have been asked a long time ago, "Then where's my daughter?" The day of the meeting arrived. I had invited everyone, my parents, my grandmother, the Hall family, Ms. Collins, and Mrs. White. As people slowly filled the conference room, I could feel the tension in the air. Ms. Collins tried to downplay the situation, saying that there was no evidence of a mistake. But I presented the evidence one by one, calmly and methodically. When Mrs. White walked into the room, Ms. Collins's face crumbled. She tried to defend herself, but her words sounded hollow. The whole room turned to my father, who stood up shakily. He looked at Lily, his real daughter, and then at me. There were no words in his mouth, but I knew what he was thinking. I gently told him, "You were right. I was never yours." But my mother was never the one at fault. It was the hospital. My father collapsed to the floor, and for a moment, no one moved. Then, as a nurse, I stepped forward to help him. I could see the realization in his eyes, the weight of the years of false accusations finally hitting him. In the end, the hospital admitted their mistake. Mrs. Hall and my mother formed an unbreakable bond. Lily started to call my mother sometimes, and I visited Mrs. Hall regularly to get to know the family I'd lost out on for so long. My father wanted to reconcile. He came to my apartment, hat in hand, and apologized. I told him that if we were to start over, it had to be on my terms. He had to publicly apologize to my mother for all the hurt he'd caused. He agreed, perhaps for the first time truly understanding the pain he had inflicted. I spent 29 years trying to fit into a family that never fully accepted me. But now, I've found my real family, and I've learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth seeking. So if you've ever been told you don't belong, don't give up. Go find the truth, and let it set you free.